This was the first book that you wrote, and when you were writing it, were you kind of visualising what the characters would actually look like, or were you basing them on people you knew? Or
well, I sometimes do that because I'd come from writing scripts for television, so I was used to sort of acting out the characters with Matt when we were writing Little Britain, and so I'd often think about actors, when I was writing it. For example, when I was writing Mr. Stink, I was working with Michael Gambon, who you'll know who played Dumbledore in the Harry Potter films, and I just had his voice in my head. I can't remember so much with the boy in the dress if it was anyone particular, but it's helpful to me because that's where I came from.
and if we go all the way back to you kind of young David Walliams as a child, were you a big reader? Did you used to write stories? Is that the kind of thing you're into?
Well, I really came to writing because I wanted to be a comedian. I'd still love to be one day. And comedians generally, they write their own material now. So I got into writing because I wanted to perform. And I was an actor and no one would give me a job, so you end up having to become a comedian. And then I kind of fell in love with writing a bit more. I realised it was, for me at least, I thought it was a more creative thing, a more fun thing to do than the actual acting. So yes, and I just had an idea one day. I thought, what would happen if a boy went to school dressed as a girl? I thought that would be an interesting story if you played it, for real. And what would people's reactions be? Why would it test people's prejudices? And that was really the starting point from the book.
And what kind of a writer are you? The kind of writer who plans everything out meticulously in advance, or is it very much a kind of process where it just comes to you? And are you quite disciplined? I mean, do you have X amount of time today and X amount of time? How do you work as a writer?
Well, you start quite leisurely. Anyone who's writers here, I know there's a few writers here, and Ken Cecil and Andy Riley, who wrote the script with me, are here, and they did a fantastic job on it. They're brilliant comedy writers. They write Veep, amongst other things. You start quite leisurely, and then the deadline looms. Suddenly, it's 2 a.m. and you're still doing it. It's really hard to know how long it's going to take because it's a creative process, and you might have a great idea walking down the street, or you might not. You might sit at your desk for 6 hours and write something that you end up throwing away. But I'm quite disciplined. I like sort of working hard. So I put the hours in.
So you go to the nice people at HarperCollins, who are your publisher. You sit with them and you kind of talk about what your story is going to be about, and they will then.
Well, I watch their faces drop, and then I think, and then I just go away and do it, and then I work with editors and that sort of thing.
And then you kind of work out a timescale with them, and that's how.
Yes, normally the book needs to come out before Christmas. This seems to be a pattern that emerges with books. You're working towards that. And of course, when you're producing the book, it's different because you've got the illustrators got to do their work too. We're very lucky to have Quentin Blake, who also provided the illustrations for the start and end of the film. So producing the book, designing it, and that's all a lot of work. So your part of writing the story is only part of that.
And you say about Quentin Blake, and obviously Quentin Blake, we know amongst other things for his great work with the Roald Dahl. And a lot of people have kind of compared some of the sort of stories that you're coming out with and the way that you write to Roald Dahl. Was he an influence on you? Did you like his work?
Definitely. My mum's here and my sister's here today, and we used to go to the local library, Bounstead Library, and we'd get out books every couple of weeks. And one of the first books I chose for myself was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And you always remember the first book you read because that's the one that really hooked you into reading. And when I go into schools and talk to kids, you'll find a few boys, normally boys, not girls, girls are good readers, but boys will say, I don't like books at all. And I think it's just they haven't found the right book yet for them. But for me, it was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Probably most of the kids here have read it. It's a classic, isn't it? It's 50 years old now, I think. And that got me into reading. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of his work. I think, it's hard. I wouldn't make the comparison. I'm not sure he'd write this equally as I wouldn't have written anything as brilliant as anything as he did. But I suppose it's the comedy. I try and get the sense of comedy, the larger than life characters, and then sometimes some darkness in the story as well.
And are you the kind of person who will wake up in the middle of the night and write down ideas, or do you kind of write down where all your next kind of books are going to come from?
I do. Yes. The great thing now with phones and things is you can put them right and you can make a little note on your phone. If I have a good idea, I'll definitely write it down because you do forget them. That's the frustrating thing.
And how much of you, it's a difficult question to answer, I guess, in a way, but what I'm really asking is how much of you do you put into your characters? I mean, are they kind of little snippets of autobiography in there? Or
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I'd even say with Little Britain that I don't think you can really come up with a character unless a little part of them is inside of you. So even the really, really horrible characters, especially those ones, there's still some expression of you. You know, I'm not sure you can come up with a character you know nothing about whatsoever. So you try and think like them, really. And the best thing, when you're writing a book and the characters are coming together, the story's coming together, the great thing is at some point it starts writing itself a bit, because you've created this situation, you've created the characters, and then it starts to unfold. And it's weird because this is very emotional. Every time I see this, I actually get a little tearful. And I was tearful writing the book, and it's odd because I know it's not real. But it always gets me every time.
But there is something about that message, isn't there, about celebrating being an individual and not conforming. And I mean, is that something you can relate to?
Definitely. Well, I think we all can in some way, can't we? And everyone feels a bit different, especially when you're a kid and you feel something goes wrong in your life, or something you feel a bit excluded from your friends or whatever it might be. And so I thought it was a good message, and that's why I make the connection with Darvesh and him wearing the patka, because I wanted to make sure that children understood we weren't just talking about this one thing, which was wearing dresses.
And in terms of, obviously, this was your first novel for children, but it wasn't the first one that's been televised.
No.
You've had two previously, which were
Gangster Granny and Mr. Stink.
And can you tell us about the process of? I know that that you've had sort of help in terms of adapting them, but it's your production company, and you've been very involved in them. Can you tell us about that process of turning them from a book into something on the big screen?
Well, it's great because you get a sort of chance to have another look at the book and iron out the things that maybe you weren't quite happy with about them, and things do happen differently in the film than they do in the book, and I kind of like that. And there's characters added. I think because I came from writing for television, I'm not like a precious author. Have you seen the film Saving Mr. Banks?
Yes.
Which is about the writer of Mary Poppins, who basically hated the film, hated everything Walt Disney wanted to do. I'm not like that. I'm quite, I like.
So you're very open to change.
Yes, I think the book's still there if people want to read that, and now we've got this great film of it. So I'm really, really pleased. I see them as slightly different things, but as long as the spirit's the same, as long as the humour's the same, it's fine for me. But yeah, I work. You work. It's a massive team when you do a TV film. Everyone has to do their job perfectly. The director, producer, obviously costume, makeup, the actors are all fantastic, and this is. This one is really led by the young actors in this, and I think they're just absolutely brilliant performances from all of them. So I know they're here today. Thank you so much.
It's so crucial, isn't it? When you're doing a piece and children at the heart of it, that casting is so critical, isn't it?
Yeah, you need to really emote with the children, and also the thing about casting, kids is that you generally get them when they're not very well known, because by the time they've done something and made an impact, they're already 16, and then they're too old to cast.
And when you're doing something for television, for the BBC or whoever, are there any kind of restrictions as to what you can and can't show? Were there any issues with anything that came up, or was it all quite straightforward?
No, but we had to deal with this sensitively because it's a difficult subject. When I wrote the book, I thought, I'm writing a book called The Boy in the Dress, but I didn't want to use the word transvestite in it. I didn't want to define it in those terms. Obviously not, because I don't have any problem with it, but I just wanted to make sure it was done in a completely child-friendly way. The books are aimed at 8 to 12-year-olds, and similar with this film, we just had to deal with it sensitively because it's a slightly difficult area that people have very strong feelings about. So I think it was dealing with that. That was the thing that was the hardest thing in a way, just putting it in terms that a young audience can understand.
If one of them was to say to you, what advice would you give me as somebody who loves writing at school and they really like writing stories and stuff, and this is something that they really want to go into, what advice would you give them?
I just do as much as you can. I was very lucky. I went to a school where I was encouraged to do plays, and we do like comedy sketches in assemblies, and I would just say, just do as many things as you can, get as much experience as you can, and do it for the love of it, because that's ultimately what it's all about.
And the books are continuing to come out. Awful Auntie came out very recently, and it's just completely been at #1 for weeks. And I mean, you should be ashamed, really. I mean, you've stopped all these other books kind of going there. You've just hogged the limelight now in children's writing for a little while. But are there plans to make that into another TV special and so forth?
Well, Billionaire Boy we're going to do that for next year, which is very exciting. And then a couple of the films have been optioned as movies as well, which is Ratburger and Demon Dentist.
Gosh.
So we'll see.
So 7 so far. So that is so that's 1, 2, 3. That is 6 out of the 7 then.
Yes, just Awful Auntie. We're just thinking about who we might put that with at the moment. Well, one thing I like to point out is the hypocrisy of adults. You know, because grown-ups, they always set rules. Obviously, none of the grown-ups here, but grown-ups set lots of rules for kids, and often they don't obey those rules themselves. And that's what I wanted to get with the headmaster. That he had a secret too. I think Tim McInner's performance is as faultless. Is brilliant because he gets the real. He gets the sadness. He gets the sadness of Mr. Hawthorne, which I think is wonderful. Because anyone who's that kind of cruel and nasty normally is holding some kind of sadness in them. So I'd say I really love that part of it and his performance in the film. I'd say it's probably Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I wrote it under, I didn't want to take the credit, I wrote it under pseudonym. I let this very nice lady take the credit for it. No, I'd say, you like them all for different reasons. The weird thing is I wrote Boy in the Dress like 6-7 years ago, and until we started adapting it, I wasn't thinking about it much, and I sort of actually, now I think maybe sometimes your first one is often your best. So I think, certainly of the 3 films, I'm proudest of this.
You're just talking then about working with the guys who are adapting it. How does that work? You sit down with them and...
Well, we sit down for initial meetings, and then Kevin and Andy are a writing team, and they've written many, many brilliant things together over the years, and they actually did the first few drafts of this, and then I took over for a bit, and then we all worked together. So
it all comes together.
Yeah, and we did the same with Gangster Granny, and it was very harmonious. Well, I hope so. I hope they enjoyed it too. But it's great. Yeah, I get on very well with them, and they've got loads of brilliant ideas, and they make what I've written in the book bigger and better.
You were saying before about you've already thought about your next one. I mean, do you actually have them sort of lined up, or do they come one at a time?
It's weird. Every time you write one, you think, oh, I can't write another one, because it was just so hard and I haven't got any more ideas, and then inevitably it comes around again and you're ready again to write another one.
Could you ever imagine revisiting the same character? Could you ever imagine going back into the same world as any of the ones you've already had?
Well, generally children's authors tend to write series of books. Roald Dahl didn't. He only wrote one sequel, which is Great Grass Elevator, but there's the Horrid Henry books, there's the Mr. Gum books, Harry Potter. Most authors are doing series, but I like just doing something different all the time. But I do have Raj reappears in all the books, and that's apart from the last one. But I like that he connects the world,